Welcome to Conflict to Connection, the podcast that helps families navigate separation with compassion and understanding. I'm Mitch, a child consultant at Civilized Separations, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Bill and Bella. Together, we tackle tough conversations about divorce, co-parenting, and creating healthier family dynamics. Whether you're navigating a separation or just looking for better ways to connect, this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. Welcome to Conflict to Connection. I'm Mitch, a psychology graduate and child consultant at Civilized Separations. Today we're exploring the topic of why are we even fighting? As always, I'm joined by Bill, a post-separation family repair specialist and founder of Civilized Separations, with decades of experience as a mediator, and Bella, our lead child consultant at Civilized Separations, with years of experience working in child-inclusive mediation. Welcome.
Hello.
Our topic today is why are we even fighting? I'm sure it's not just me, but many people feel as though they're in an argument and they are right in the midst of it, and they kind of go, what was the first point I was making there? Or what was I saying at the beginning? Why were we even started this in the first place? How did this happen? Why is this, Bill? Why do we get to this point where we don't even know why we're arguing in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting phenomena that we find ourselves in conflict very often. Both people are simultaneously wishing they weren't, and both thinking, why are you being so difficult? And I think that conflict tends to come from an unconscious message that tells you that you are being attacked or criticized, or that you need to defend yourself. And it's all, I think, coming back from early childhood experiences that are telling you what to expect, what's about to happen. So you might, as a child, have had a less than ideal childhood. So you would have had experiences whereby on occasions you would have experienced hurt. You would have been attacked. You would have learnt perhaps that you need to be wary because people can be tricky or catch you out or hurt you, So you've got this unconscious experience that tells you that you need to do something in response to what's being said. So you make meaning of the other person's behavior. You make meaning of their demeanor. And you're offended by it, even though that person may not want to offend you, and you may not have any conscious reason to respond, but unconsciously you feel that something's happened and you need to address it. It's like a survival mechanism as much as anything, an unconscious voice that says you need to do something about this because you're being criticized or whatever. So the unconscious voice tells you need to take action. You take action. The other person responds to that by like, why are you being so horrible to me for? I wasn't being horrible to you. And suddenly you're both immersed in this conflict without either of you wanting to be in it and thinking, well, obviously we're in a conflict. I don't want it. So obviously you do. And they're both simultaneously thinking that, because you didn't know how you got into the argument. So you got to now sort of consciously explain your position. So it's a very bizarre phenomena, because, of course, if you unconsciously trigger someone, they will respond, and then you'll respond to their response until you start to really feel hurt. And then you're going to have a very familiar argument, one you've had 1,000 times before with that person, and then they find themselves dropping into this very familiar pattern, thinking, oh, God, here you go. I know what you're going to say now. Of course, the other one thinking that as well. That's when the whole conflict becomes really dysfunctional, and you just get deeper and deeper and deeper and more stuck and more helpless and more hopeless and more hurt. Those arguments never end well. And if you have a lot of those over years, you find yourself thinking that's who you are. Like the person I see when we're having one of those gridlock arguments is who you really are.
That's the real you.
That's the real you. So when we're having an argument, you say those hurtful things, those are the things you really think about me. So after a while, you become very pessimistic about the other person. You start to increasingly see that that's all there is to them. That's who they are. So everything else sort of disappears, and you just have this big problematic, deep expectation the other person's going to say horrible things to you.
So these arguments, these kind of conflicts that end up going over and over and over again, is that then just stemming from an unconscious childhood factor, like a response to a trauma or a response to a biological thing that we have as humans?
It is like biological. The brain prioritizes old learning over new.
Okay.
So if the old learning said, you should anticipate you're about to be criticized or you're about to be upset or hurt or treated badly, even though you might be sort of in some ways thinking, I understand what's going on here and I understand why you're saying what you're saying, the old learning will kick in and go, you need to defend yourself now. It will override your newer learning, if you like this person's been quite nice to me recently, so maybe I should hold that in my mind as to what's going on. The old learning would go, no, I need to override that and tell you you're in danger now.
And what would that old learning look like? What's an example of that? Say I was, having these arguments all the time. What could possibly be the old learning from that?
Let's suppose that when you were a kid, one or both of your parents were less than able to parent you as they might probably wish to. There might be mental health issues, there might be alcohol and drugs, there might be, any one of 1,000 what they call adverse childhood experiences. So as a kid, when you were trying to work out how safe you were, how attuned your parents were to you, you would have on occasion said a message that said, actually, we're not that interested in you right now. We've got something else going on. We're fighting with each other, or we're at work, or we're stressed, or we're anxious. So our ability to kind of tune into you and remind you of how important you are and how safe you are is limited at this moment. Just normal life. It's what we call complex trauma. It's just everyday stuff. These would set unconscious templates in your mind to tell you what's about to happen to you when you're older. And you can't really override these unconscious messages. Well, you can kind of get to a point where you become conscious of them, but it's not easy. You've got to put time and effort into that. Let's suppose you had a mum who's very anxious and you learnt as a kid that if you were upset, it was best to keep it to yourself. Because if you told your mum you're upset, she'd get even more anxious and more upset and you'd wish you hadn't said it. So that would establish an unconscious template that says just keep your feelings to yourself. Don't share them. It's too risky. And that's what you'd put into practice when you were older. Of course, you're in a relationship with someone and they're trying to say to you what's going on, how you're feeling. And this inner voice says, keep it to yourself, don't express it. They're going to think, well, you obviously don't care about me very much, because that unconscious voice has said, no, keep it to yourself. So that's how you get into problems as an adult, because these unconscious lessons that you learned as a kid are governing how you relate and what meaning you make of other people's behavior and how you respond when people treat you a particular way. It's unconscious. You don't know you're doing it. So that's why you find yourself immersed into a conflict without wanting it.
Bella, do you find, as a child consultant, do you find that comes up often, even just with the children, if interviewing the children before they're even adults? Do you notice that in them?
Yeah, I think we would, especially children who are really, really young, children who are, let's say, 5 years old. And, their brains at that age are just literally coming out of, I've just learned how to survive. And now I'm starting to gain this tiny little grasp on empathy. I think I'm understanding emotions, but not really. I'm still super egotistical. That ability to self-reflect is obviously, they can't at that age. But if it's something that's happened since you were tiny, then the unconsciousness of it all is going to be all the more powerful. So I suppose if occasionally, yeah, we might be interviewing children who are really, really young and they're saying things that, are going to be problematic. And of course, that is shared with the parents. It's important. And, it helps them to sort of refocus on things, I suppose. There's something happening here. It could be distracting them from just caring about 5-year-old things. There seems to be a little responsibility they've got on their shoulders here. They're deciding that this is their problem. And of course, parents, that breaks their hearts. It's absolutely devastating to hear. And so I suppose that is something that we can help in terms of making something conscious. When you're speaking to parents, I guess it helps to sort of break the cycle, which is really good. If you can make things conscious, if you make parents conscious of what's happening for the children, that can help them, especially if the children are really young, because then you can reverse it, or you can start to shift things. But that's not to say that it has to be when they're really tiny. It can be any time. You can start to shift things when your children are 20. Start to introduce them to something a bit more open-minded.
Really interesting about the effects that your childhood can have on being an adult, and the habits that you have, and the things that you pick up and you keep from when you were a child all the way into adulthood. So in talking about this kind of why are we even fighting aspect, say I was, in a relationship, and I was coming home from work. I'd had a really long day. It was really challenging. And I kind of come through the door, and without even really realizing it, we're already having an argument within the first 3 minutes. We've said hi, and all of a sudden we're off. And I know, I'm sure we've all had those moments, in periods of time, but this kind of is consistently happening over and over again. Why is it when I come through the door? Why is that happening? Is that just to do with kind of the conflict styles coming out in us from our childhood? Is that why we're kind of going at each other so instantaneously without even saying a word? We're already at each other's throats a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you walked in the door and you looked at the other person and you're trying to get a sense of what sort of state of mind are you in, because I need to work out how I'm going to be towards you. And you've had a difficult childhood, so you've kind of got this expectation that it might not be good. This person might not be feeling well towards me. You're looking at them to see evidence of how they're going to be seeing me. What do they feel when they see me? And you've got that expectation. You're probably going to get your expectations confirmed, even if that person wasn't feeling negatively towards you at all. And of course, if you expect to not be well received, you're going to take action in anticipation of that. You're going to say something to them because you know they're about to say something horrible to you. Well, actually, maybe they won't. But of course, now that you've said something horrible, now they do. So that's why you get that sense of shock at suddenly being immersed in conflict, because you have sent a message, quite possibly to that person, that they don't like the feeling of, or they've sent you a message that you don't like the feeling of, and actually no one knows they've done it. And the thing to do, the thing to get good at, and this is very useful in terms of the post-separation parenting relationship, is find out what cue would you send if that person was thinking, oh, this is going to be okay. What is it that you need? And it's interesting, I often think that the enormously complex process that people go through when they separate, where they end up going to court and they end up having independent social workers and they end up having psychologist reports and they end up having endless legal processes, and all of this has stemmed from the fact that they didn't know that all they needed to do when they walked into the room was do this thing that the other person really loves. So when you go through that entire process with people and say, well, imagine you were walking in and you thought, wow, this is going to be good. Something about them, their demeanor, that's making me think this is going to be really good. What would that be? Well, first of all, they talk about what they wouldn't be getting because they're so well versed in what's wrong. But eventually, if you sort of continued, they'd say, well, he would smile. And you say, oh, so a smile would send a lot of messages to you that you'd really like. Yeah. What is it about the smile that you'd be liking? Well, it would tell me that this person was going to be friendly towards me or warm towards me, or it's going to be an enjoyable conversation. So if you get that message, you're more than happy to reciprocate. Oh, absolutely, yeah. If he smiled at me, I'd be more than happy to smile back at him. So if you want to make sure that when you walk in the door it goes well, find out what that person really cares about. It's going to be really simple.
So they're cueing each other
The cue.
wrong when they're having, so
When the row happens, it's a
as they
miscue.
come in,
Yeah.
it's like instantaneous.
And the cue, if the cue is the right one, and that's why we're saying if you're going to have a great parenting relationship after separating, probably a much better relationship than you had when you were together, find out what that person wants to hear or see from you. And all you need to do is make sure that that thing happens at the beginning of the conversation. Because if it starts well, it'll end well. If it starts badly, which is a miscue, it will end badly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's less about what they're actually talking about and more about what the cue is, what their tone is, what they look like. And in terms of that, if that's an argument that's consistently coming up over and over and over again, like, I don't know, that one of them wants the parent to go to private school and one of them wants the kids to go to public school, or, whatever it may be. And it's really definitely have really strong opinions about it. And it comes up over and over and over again. And every time it comes up, they go, oh, and there they go again. Does that like, when people come to you, I'm sure you hear often about all those things that come up over and over and over again. How is it just about saying something nice before you have that conversation?
Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculously simple, doesn't it? But yes, absolutely. If the person feels valued, if they feel their opinion is appreciated, you'll get a very nice, easy-going version of that person. It's all about context, not content. And I feel that everything that deals with the whole post-separation process is always about content, not about how did you feel when the discussion was happening. It was always about what was the discussion saying and what can we glean about that person's character from what was said. So it's much more important to make sure that you begin on that process of connection, goodwill, compassion, optimism, welcome. If it begins like that, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. It'll go well because people are on board. And interestingly, just in terms of the brain, if you walked in and you got a message that made you feel afraid that this isn't going to go well, half your brain will go offline. The bit of brain that's really good at relationships and describing what you want to say in kind of complex detail and having a way of saying it that really lands with the other person, really articulate, all of the bit of brain that would be good at helping you describe what you want to say would go offline.
So explain that a bit more to me. What does that mean when you say it goes offline when I'm really frustrated about this thing and I've come in and now you're saying that my one half of my brain's gone offline. What does that mean?
It's like we sometimes describe it as flipping. So if you think about the brain, there's a bit in the middle that's purely kind of emotional. That's called the limbic system, the amygdala. It's like a sort of a brain that a horse would have. And then you've got this wonderful, sophisticated cortex that humans have, which is incredibly sophisticated and very good at relationships and incredibly able to deal with incongruence and anomaly and very subtle and difficult, finessed, nuanced topics. It's not there when you're having an argument. The bit you need isn't there. So it flips. You flip your lid. The only bit that's working now is the horse brain. Horses aren't very good at managing relationships.
It's like, true. And in terms of that, it's like, is that like a survival thing? Is it just like instant survival method? I'll use as little brain as possible to get me through the situation.
Exactly. It's a safety mechanism. It's like if you're in a cave in our ancestors' time and a saber-toothed tiger comes into the cave, you're not thinking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what sort of childhood this saber-toothed tiger had. You're just going to deal with the situation right then, flight or flight. You're not going to have capacity to manage the nuanced, complex requirements that a human has, because we really need to feel valued. We need 5 positive interactions to undo the effect of one negative one. We're very, very, very relational. And our primary concern is, are we welcome? Are we valued? So if you go back to our ancestors, the only way we survived was by belonging in community with other people. So we got very, very good at belonging, very good at working out how can we fit in here? How can we be necessary? So if you get a message that says no, and if you've had a childhood that says probably not,
then you're already cueing that everyone is thinking.
Yeah.
That's
and of course
really
your worst predictions come true.
Yeah, I often find that, at the end of the day, like what you were saying about the 5 positive things outweighs the 1 negative. It's so true. I mean, I come to the end of the day and I will be thinking, oh, no, I didn't do that. This happened. That's so embarrassing. Or this was the issue. And actually probably had a really good day. Or I had I don't know, got a free coffee or I did whatever. But actually I'll be thinking about all of those things that I did wrong more than I'll be thinking about the thing that I did right. And so if we're so biologically influenced, if we're so kind of unconsciously biased and we have these conflict styles and these habits that from our childhood, from biologically, literally from day one almost, how do we kind of hack that? How do we change that for ourselves to have this positive communication that you're talking about, or especially when we're arguing, when we're in the middle of an argument and you kind of go, why are we even arguing? God's sake, this is so annoying. And then what do I do in that moment? How do I kind of stop that in that moment?
You can set up your relationship to have a capacity to offer a pause in a given moment. You could sort of both say to each other, when we start heading into that sort of vortex of conflict where we both feel we're getting sucked into that place where we're thinking, oh God, here we go. you could have an agreement that either could say, could we just pause? So if you think about the lid being flipped, if you had a 2-minute pause, the lid would come back online again. And then you could take advantage of a much more sophisticated brain that would be able to explain what you just said in more detail. And you'd be able to sort of deal with that very fast sense of danger that stopped you being able to kind of function well. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is have an inbuilt mechanism where you catch yourself as you get on a roll before you go on your existential journey of kind of angst and sort of, telling yourself horrible stories about yourself and everyone around you. You can kind of catch yourself at it and think, what am I saying to myself? Where's this line of thinking taking me? And why am I doing it? Why am I indulging in such catastrophic thinking? So you wake up to it. You're less of a slave to those kind of automatic unconscious impulses. The other thing you can do is sow into your relationship a mechanism whereby you can both bring out the best in each other. You can make sure that you don't get caught up in something that's going to take you both into a conflict. You could have a moment of humor almost, where you could say, oops, I think we're going down that vortex.
Yeah.
Call it. If you can kind of give a systemic take on it, as in, let's talk about what's happening to the context that we're in. Let's not get caught up in the content of our row and talk about the nitty-gritty detail, who said what and what it meant and when and blah, blah, blah. Let's just zoom out and look at ourselves from a broader, more holistic perspective. So we can say something like, hang on, it is Monday, and we have both had a difficult day, and we're both worried about paying the mortgage, and we're both concerned about your job because it looks like your boss is giving you a hard time, and the kids have been acting up a lot recently. Let's just have a think about this more globally and think about, are we just under stress? Are we just possibly, finding ourselves overwhelmed, and is it playing out in our relationship and our reactions towards each other? Can we just zoom out?
Yeah, it takes it back to what you were saying about context over content. It's not about you and what you did and what you've said. It's about like the context of what we're experiencing right now. What's going on in this situation? There's more than just what we're saying or what we're cueing or whatever. There's so many other factors here. There could be other factors that haven't even happened yet.
Yeah, we haven't even considered that they might be. I think just bearing in mind there might be other factors in itself is enough.
Yeah.
Because you're moving away from that sort of real nitty-gritty, it was 7:30, no it wasn't, it was 7:45, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you find, Bella, that you're giving advice about, when are you giving advice and what are you saying to people when you want them to kind of have that more holistic idea of relationships? I suppose what I'm thinking is when you're in an argument and you don't have that holistic approach and that feeling, you're kind of like, it's all content. It's all, what have they done? Why did they do it? How did it hurt me? What can stop that becoming more holistic?
I think that if the unconscious is still buried, it might inhibit you to be able to have that self-reflective moment or to just take a second to breathe. Because, for example, if you grew up and one of your parents was, overly social, and sometimes it actually seemed as though, they prioritize their friendships over you or something. And then when you're older and you're in a relationship with someone who's very social, and so sometimes you might come home and they already have friends around and you instantly get triggered and you have absolutely no idea why. And you may have even thought, you look back at your childhood and you think, yeah, my parent was so much fun. They always had people around. We always had parties. They were always socializing. I was always surrounded by people. But actually, unconsciously, you got a message that you're not as important as my friends right now. And so when you walk into the door and you see that there are people around and you instantly get triggered, you have absolutely no idea where that comes from. So I think that becoming aware of the unconscious template and kind of what informed it when you were younger, of course, that happens from engaging with things like therapy and counseling. When you actually open up that box and you discover more about what it was that actually informed your relationship template, then you can have those moments. You can have those sort of pauses and think, hang on, is this a context issue? First of all, are we super stressed? But also, let's not forget that this might be something that I'm particularly sensitive about because I experienced it in my childhood. Of course, they're not trying to give me the impression that they don't care about me as much as they care about their friends. But it was a message I got in my childhood from time to time. So I suppose self-reflection helps to be able to get to that moment of pausing and zooming out, certainly being aware. Oh, is this something that I'm particularly sensitive about? Potentially it is. Potentially that's kind of kicking in now. So if I become aware of it and I sort of acknowledge it, as well as the fact that we are super stressed. It's been raining for a month straight. Our baby's not eating very well and that sort of thing, like there's so much. It's hard to be a human.
Because I can imagine that building that pause is one of the most difficult things. Like, how do you do that in that situation of just going, okay, let's just stop for a second? Do you have to be like quite conscious of the fact that you need to do that and just be like the one to go, hey, let's stop? Is there any techniques to kind of getting to that point where
It
you
could
can
be pre-agreed.
Okay.
And you could have a name for it. You could
Okay.
even have some sort of motif around the house
All right.
that represents the zoom out or the pause. And you could both just,
What we
can we
need right
just do that
now.
thing? So you've kind of agreed before what it means. And it could have particular conditions attached to it. So we have to stop talking immediately. We have to both go and get a glass of water. We have to kind of listen to our breathing for 2 minutes.
Wow.
Those aren't my rules or your rules. They're the relationship's rules. And we have to abide by them. And if anyone calls it, we both hereby commit to following it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a preemptive thing is definitely like a contract is so good, because I suppose you can imagine yourself if you're in the middle of a point and you're just about to make it, and then your partner goes, "Let's take a second." Then that's going to be antagonistic,
Yeah.
obviously. So if there's something kind of preempted,
Okay.
I just need to let you know that I'm starting to get overwhelmed. Like I want to hear what you're saying, but I'm feeling myself starting to get overwhelmed. So
why don't
finish your point, and then can we take a break?
I've seen studies about how, like, obviously, once you've got that pause and you can bring yourself back to kind of that more holistic feeling and have those more holistic conversations, it's less content, more contextual. I've seen kind of studies about how eye contact, looking into each other's eyes, into each other's faces, those sorts of things kind of help you ground you to actually, this person is here and they're real and they're hearing what I'm saying and it's affecting them.
You can't see the other person in a binary way if you are making eye contact, or if you are holding the hand, or if you are just allowing yourself to kind of consider there might be more to this than this one thing that I've just come up with. Yeah. And interesting, you were talking about conflict styles before. So different people develop different ways of managing conflict also in response to how they kind of grow up. Sometimes you'll have someone who's very outcome focused and not so relationship focused. So they're very keen to make their point. They're very keen to make sure that what they're trying to say is understood. And that might have been because when they grew up, they found if they didn't really kind of emphatically advocate for themselves, they didn't get heard. So they're not doing it because they're trying to control. They're not doing it because they want to win. They're just doing it because that's how they've learned to do conflict. On the other hand, you might have someone who's learned to do conflict by withdrawing and trying to sort of find some sort of inner peace or sort of way of getting away, from it. So sometimes you've got the shark who's very outcome focused and not very relationship focused, looking like they want to bite your head off. And then we've got the turtle going into the shell. Now, the turtle seems to be saying to the shark, I'm not interested in what you have to say, which, of course, the shark finds deeply upsetting because they're just trying to make a point. And the turtle's thinking, look, if I stick my head out, you'll bite it off. So the shark doesn't realize that that's the impression they're giving. So you've got this phenomenon where two people are sending messages to each other that the other one finds profoundly difficult, but they don't know they're doing
they're
it.
Getting a completely different message than the other one is trying to give. Yeah. The other one's trying to say, I really need you to hear what I'm trying to say right now. Yeah. I really need this for you to acknowledge the fact that I'm actually saying this. I need an outcome of you saying that you've heard me. And the other one's going, gosh, you're attacking me. You're coming at me.
So it's a case of finding out, how can you can be a shark sometimes and be a turtle sometimes, but just be aware of the fact that you might be communicating something to the other person that they might not be finding easy. So have a combination of outcome and relationship at the same time, a balance.
I suppose that's exactly why you often think, oh, I've said this, but like they seem to have gone off with some sort of something else that I didn't even say.
Yeah, some other message.
And I
Yeah.
go, how did you get to that point that you're making? But actually they've got all this other things that they're doing, or their childhood has shown them, or their contextual cues that you're giving off, or their conflict style is making them feel like you've said something else. It's really interesting.
That's right. Yeah, sometimes when working with people and someone will say something and the other one will launch into a passionate kind of defense, and because I'm not them, so I don't know what the meaning they made of that person, so that person seemed to have said something completely benign as far as I can see, but the other person's reacting to it worse.
When you're in session with people, do you often find that they're miscuing each other? Do you see that?
Yeah,
do
you
you
see them do it.
going, how did you get to that point?
You see them do
Really?
it. And you can say, that's interesting. I just noticed your relationship really let you down just then. Because I think what you tried to say was that thing. And I think what you were trying to say came from a place of goodwill. I think, would it be true to say that that's what you wanted to say? Yeah. But I think what you heard was something that you considered to be critical and hurtful and unkind. Is that what happened? So your relationship mangled the information. You put it in good faith, and what you heard was the opposite of what they were trying to say. So the relationship's messing up the messages. And if you give that perspective of being let down by a relationship that's inadequate or inefficient, it gives people a lot more of a contextual kind of understanding. Oh, that's interesting. The way our relationship works, when we speak to each other and we want to say something, it manages the information poorly and we both hear stuff that's not okay and we don't feel good about it. So maybe we should change the relationship. Maybe we should change how it works so that it doesn't let us down. It doesn't result in mangling the information. And that's why we're saying the post-separation parenting reliance is far more effective and far better at being bespoke and tailor-made and appropriate for these people than the relationship they had before.
Yeah.
Because the rules that they were running before were constructed when they were like 21. And here they are trying to use the same relationship at 45. So this is an opportunity. The separation is a great opportunity to rewrite the relationship conditions, and it'll have smiling in it.
That's really interesting. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today. We hope you found it interesting and learned something new that maybe you can use in your relationship. Subscribe to Conflict to Connection and share it with someone who might benefit. You can also find resources on our website at civilizedseparations.co.uk.